what he's all about on today's show. So welcome, Dan. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Chaz. Glad to be here with you.
How is it going out there in Gibson County?
Well, aside from the ice, if you've been in Indiana or even in the Midwest in the last few days, you know that the weather has had a significant impact. It pretty well shut everything down at this part of the state, unlike the middle of the state and the northern areas where, of course, they still understand how snow actually works. Down here in the south end of the state, I'm pretty sure they'll still be trying to figure it out 500 years from now. So anyways, there's a lot shut down. The ice was pretty significant. Watched an accident occur even on the way into the office this morning. So they're expecting a little more snow tonight. So yeah, it's a great state. I'm glad to be here.
Same here, and I'll say this has probably been one of the most significant snows in probably like the past 10 years.
Definitely,
it's not frequent.
I'd say in this part of the state, we get maybe one decent weather event every 5 years, and this appears to be it.
Yep. So we won't have another one until 2030.
It's a good time for it. I'll be retired and I'll be happy with a little bit of luck.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again for joining today. Let's go ahead and go right into the military service. So, what was your military story?
So my military story was rather interesting. As you'll recall in previous conversations, I had originally enlisted active duty Air Force. I was one of those kids that quickly found out after attending college that college was not where I wanted to be. So I needed out of Michigan, which is where I'm from, and I wanted a change in scenery. So I did what any smart kid or kid that's desperate wanted to do, is I went and enlisted. And then the real interesting part occurred realistically within those 3 months while I was in a delayed enlistment program. I had planned on being active duty Air Force, but I had the MOS that I had chosen was going to put me on a delay. So for those 3 months, I had to do something. I went and found me a temporary job working for Ford Motor Company, basically being a data entry person. It beat working in fast food. So anyways, I did that, and through a strange series of events, I was offered full-time employment. Not really wanting to go back on that military commitment, I was able to work with the recruiter at that time, got a switch to a reserve commitment, and which ironically turned into a career with both the Air Force and within both Ford Motor and multiple companies since then.
Oh, fantastic. So with that and everything that you were doing, how did that help you transition to who you are today?
Well, hands down, for any veteran out there or anybody that's been through basic training, there is one specific task that any training instructor or drill instructor is given, and that is to beat the individual out of the individual and form you back as a team and learn to respect military tradition and everything that goes with it. I was no different. At the time that I enlisted, I was the most important person in my universe, hands down. And I'll save all of the backstory, but the one thing that I learned real quick in basic training is that I, in fact, was not God's gift to mankind. Those training instructors were really good at helping you overcome yourself. And it taught me a lot about who I needed to be, not who I was, because quite frankly, who I was somebody that, in retrospect, even I didn't like very much. But I learned the value of respect. And ironically, Chaz, you and I talked previously, I come from a military background. My family's military through and through. There's service and lifelong service permeated throughout my entire family, going back multiple generations. So enlisting was a natural fit for me. Enlisting in the Air Force was a break from tradition. My family is historically Army. And despite this, they didn't hold it against me. At any rate, I was convinced that I wanted to be on an airplane traveling somewhere as frequently as humanly possible. So I went Air Force, and the rest, as they say, is history.
What were some interesting places that you went when you were in?
A lot of places domestically in the States. Really, the most interesting would have been Europe, hands down. Germany, Spangdahlem Air Base, Germany. That was fun. Small little base north of there, Wuschheim Air Base was another place that I got to spend some quality time. Um, and then, of course, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Spain, Portugal, you know, various places. But truthfully, it wasn't so much about the travel; it was more about the people. Uh, the relationships that I made were hands down some of the closest relationships I've enjoyed in my adult life.
Okay, okay. Um, Now, as far as like transitioning, like what lessons learned could you provide to somebody that's getting out of the service today?
Boy, that is really what brings you and I together today. And in my opinion, there are a lot of things that transitioning service members can bring to the private sector and engage in. First and foremost is an open mind. Uh, the private sector is not the military. Unless you are going into an organization that has a strong military connection, it is highly probable that they're not going to understand what you did and who you were in the military. For those that are coming out of the service in the E4, E5, E6 grades, or even in the junior officer ranks, it means a lot more in the military than it does in the private life initially. They're going to respect your service. They're not going to respect what you did when you were in the service so much. You're going to have to be prepared to, quite frankly, prove yourself all over again. You come out in those senior enlisted ranks, E7 and above, E6, even E6 to some extent, it's a little bit different. You've clearly demonstrated leadership skills, and they're expecting you as you transition into civilian life to be that leader that you were in the military. Maybe not so much in some of the junior ranks. It's a little different. Some of the roles that you played in the military obviously will factor into that as well. But I don't think on the civilian side that they truly appreciate that the military was, in addition to being all of the traditions, all of the customs, everything that makes it what it is, it's also a job and for some a career choice, just like being on the outside. You get up, you get dressed for work, you go to work, you do your job to the best of your ability, and then you go home to your family at the end of the day. And that's far more the military than I think what civilians truly appreciate.
What's one of the, I guess, interesting stories that you've had when you were in the military, as far as like projects?
Well, hands down, I mentioned that little air base called Wuschheim. That was my favorite story. Flew into Spangdahlem Air Base from Michigan, expecting to. At that point in time, I was part of a security police flight out of Selfridge Air Base, and our role was to augment the SPF group or the security police out of Spangdahlem. Well, somewhere in the days, perhaps weeks leading up to that trip, a conversation took place that I was unaware of. So that when we landed after a really long flight on a C-130, as I walked off the tail end of that C-130, there was another SP standing there with a placard as if it was a commercial flight and I was on a business trip. He had my name on that placard, complete with a German Shepherd, and said, "Hey, we need to check your bags. You're going someplace else." I thought it was a joke. I thought the guys in my unit were pulling a fast one on me, but in fact, it was not a joke. They were absolutely serious. Um, As you know, by MOS, I was an administrative professional. I was a paper pusher assigned to the security police. And while I did do paper pushing for the military and all that was entailed in that, but that was not all that I did. I brought a fairly high level of computer skills in with me, and that career choice was the one that got me back into both my civilian and military role the quickest.
Okay.
So there were reasons for it. Long story short, they knew that I could write code. I knew quite a bit about computers, and in the conversation, it turns out that the military had spent a fair amount of money on a maintenance program for the ground launch cruise missiles, and it did not work. And they said, you're going to go to Vushheim Air Base where you're going to work on this program and fix it, or you're going to be there for a very long time. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously, that's not the exact words of the conversation, but the long and short of it is I didn't really have a whole lot of say in the matter. So off I went on a drive, immediately leaving my flight, and found myself working in a basement at Vushheim and working on this program that I had no idea what it was written in. I had no idea what the program was doing or what it was supposed to do. I had no idea where it was broken. I just knew that if I wanted to get back to my unit, I needed to fix it. And it was perhaps one of the craziest things. If you're familiar with computers, and you know that's my private business as well, there are an awful lot of programming languages. Even back in the late 80s and early 90s, there were still a significant volume of programming languages. There was absolutely no guarantee I would have any idea what this code was or what it did or how it did it. We just got lucky on all 3 points is what it boiled down to. So I was able to fix that program and salvage a rather expensive program for the Department of Defense and the U.S. military and the Air Force specifically, for which I got a great certificate of appreciation. It was great. But I did make it back to Spangdahlem and I was able to rejoin my unit. But hands down, probably the craziest thing that occurred to me personally while I was in the service. Nothing quite so exotic as being deployed. You know, I also served during the first Gulf, and that was an interesting time to be a member of the military. Certainly not at all like post 9/11. By the time 9/11 occurred, I was out of the military, and I had a brother serving active duty at that time, and I saw the ringer that they pulled that they put the service members through for the next 20 years, right? So my service and their service has very little in common. Mine is good for a few laughs and certainly for a great experience, and it certainly set me up for the career that I settled into and the professional life that I've enjoyed. I don't believe that I would be the person who I am today and be where I am today had I not made that decision to enlist all those years ago.
Well, that's amazing, really showing how, one instance can really set a trajectory for somebody, in their life's passions, right? Life passions. And actually, this really kind of ties into me asking you about entrepreneurship. Because now you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner. And so what was the light bulb, right? I was like, oh, you know what? This is where I'm going to go ahead and start using my experience and building my own.
So I was smart enough to marry well and way above my head. Hands down, that was the brightest decision I ever made. And how I ended up with my wife Kelly is still a mystery to me, but I'm thankful for it most days. There are some days I question the sanity of my decision making, but all joking aside, Kelly comes from a family, from a father who was an entrepreneur as well. And this is a man who left GE after 18 years to form his own business and never looked back. And this is the environment she grew up in. And so when I had this harebrained idea after working for some of the largest companies in the world, and then spending a couple of years in the petroleum sector as well, I learned what did and did not work in business, specifically big business. And I, quite frankly, had had enough of it. I'd had my fill of it. So when I found myself facing unemployment through decisions that had nothing to do with me, I made the decision that I wanted to try this on my own. And being smart enough to marry a woman who did come from that environment, when I asked her if she would be okay if I tried to make a go at starting a business 30 years ago, she said yes. And as they say, the rest is history. So 30 years ago, next month, I started Parrish Consulting Services. And the truth is, I was scared to death. I had 3 kids and 2 on the way. My wife was pregnant with our youngest, our twins. Mortgage, car payments, all of the detritus that anybody seems to have today. In other words, debt. I mean, plenty of it. And didn't have a whole lot of money in the pocket or the bank. But what I did have was a willingness to do whatever it took to make this a successful endeavor. So for 30 years, I've never looked back. I've continued to build this company up around me, and with my wife working side by side and with me in this business, we've grown significantly, and we've enjoyed a lifestyle because of this. And the truth is kind of what brings us here today, right? I put so much of this back to the military, and not just my time in the military, but from a military father who understood and embraced discipline and hard work. Military uncles, grandfathers, brother. It's that unwillingness to quit, right? Entrepreneurship at its very core is a tolerance for risk. Well, dear God, if you put a uniform on, and I don't really care what you do in the military, how lowly you think you are, or how high up in the hierarchy you get, at the end of the day, everybody takes the same risk when they put the uniform on.
Yep.
And if you can accept that risk and you wrap your head around it, it's funny how starting a business is so minuscule. Starting a business wasn't potentially going to cost me my life. It might cost me a few dollars and a few sleepless nights, but it wasn't going to cost me my life. And really, I realize it's a simplistic view of things, but in general, that's it. That's really what it is. Entrepreneurship wasn't difficult. The work was. There was never a day where hard work wasn't part of it. You either live or die by your own ability, and not just your ability to accomplish whatever your business is, in my case, information technology, but my ability to convince people that I was their best option for solving whatever their technology needs were. And so here we are 30 years later, and I'm still doing that. I still get my hands dirty. I still do the tech work, but I also still do all of the, a fair amount of the hand pressing, the face-to-face, the convincing that we're the right choice, whatever it takes.
Well, that kind of shows a testament of really having that family support, right? Also,
100%.
the
Yes.
grit, the support, the grit, the aspects of your military service helping you to become, a business owner, which obviously 30 years later, still here and is still going strong.
It really says something, right? Because most technical businesses are lucky to survive 2 years. Most. And even in this region, right, one of the questions as a business owner and as a small business, we always get asked, who are your competitors and what do you do to stay ahead of your competitors, and competitors this and competitors that. And at the end of the day, we're not competitors. I know many of the other business executives and owners that operate in my area. Trust me when I tell you we've met. And we don't necessarily compete against each other. And the truth is we all respect one another. It, it's sort of like the age-old inter-service rivalry, right? First thing somebody introduces himself as a member or former member of the Navy, I apologize to them for that, or make some kind of a wisecrack, but at the end of the day, the amount of respect that we have for each other, allows us to recognize that a little light banter or joke is nothing more than that. But we absolutely, play well in the sandbox together, if you will.
That's important.
Yeah, and these are things you learn in the military, right? My gosh, the jokes about from one branch of the service to the other, they never stop. They're always profound. My brother and I, when we get together, the Army Air Force jokes seldom take a backseat to anything. But the hands.
I can relate. I got my brother's in the Air Force now, so and I was Marine, so definitely that natural banter.
Absolutely.
Occurs.
But at the end of the day, the respect that we have for each other far outweighs any joke. And
yeah,
and you and I've talked about my brother before, and I don't throw that phrase out lightly. But at the end of the day, he's my hero, right? Mm-hmm. The things he's done compared to the things I've done, even though they are completely different scales and whatnot, I don't know if I could do what he did, and I don't know if he could do what I've done. I really don't. But the one thing I can say is that I respect the heck out of everything he's done, and what he does even post-military, right? Talk about transition. And I don't want to make this about my brother. That's his story, and he needs to tell it, and does it far better than I could anyways. But it's what we learned in the service and the people that we served with, I think, fundamentally shape who we become. And I will never stop crediting those years in the military with much of what I have around me. I still had to do the work, let there be no mistake. And I still had the drive, and I had to be willing to take the risk. But some of the lessons that I learned in the military are what led me to being able to make those decisions and get me to where I am today. And at the end of the day, I support the veteran and the military community heavily still. I'll never not value the commitment and the self-sacrifice it takes to do what our military does.
Because we know freedom is not free.
100%.
Well, Dan, I was going to ask you, I always ask this last question. Why? Actually, I'm sorry. What are some things you want to close out with? Sorry, I went a little ahead. I was like, wait.
Gosh, I don't know how to close out anything. Chaz, I will talk your ear off if given half an opportunity. Closing out, remember, if you are a transitioning veteran, remember what led you to enlisting or commissioning in the first place, regardless of what side of that coin you are on. Don't lose sight of the hard work that you had to put in and bring that with you into the private sector. While you don't have to prove yourself, because you've already done it, you do have to demonstrate still that the value that you can lend to an organization. If you're a leader in the military, if you were a leader in the military, be a leader on the private side. Take that with you into business. No good senior member of an organization devalues that leadership component. For my part, right? You look at the technical skills necessary to do the type of work that we do. There is very little like it on the inside, in the military, if you will. So when we ask questions to people we're interviewing about the specific skills, I've gotten to where I don't even ask the questions anymore, because I know that we are operating in two different environments. The type of work that I do is different. The tools that I use are going to be different. What isn't different is the mindset and the willingness, right? So when you look at opportunities on the private side, I would strongly caution and and advise you to go in open-minded. Don't devalue yourself on any level for anyone, ever. Focus on those skills and those abilities that you bring into the private sector. The willingness to work. Let's face it, on the private side, if you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's because you're doing shift work or there's a very specific reason for it. In the military, you're getting up at 4 a.m. because there's probably a senior member of your, whatever you're a part of, kicking you on the backside, or you're already on sentry duty, or pick something. It doesn't make any difference what. You're motivated to get up. You're motivated to be there. You're motivated to present your best. Those are the skills that employers are looking for. When I speak with high school students and college students, and I work with the various college advisory boards, I'm telling these groups the same thing. The hard skills, the technical skills, they're really not what's important to us. It's those soft skills that matter to an employer most. Are you bringing the attitude and the desire to succeed with you into the workplace? Are you spending less time watching the clock and more time figuring out what you have to do to excel? We see it. You may not realize it, but we're watching. We're always watching. We're always seeing it. We're looking for those employees who will stand out. And it's not because they happen to be better at coding than the guy sitting next to them, or they happen to be better at cybersecurity than the guy next to them. Those are skills I can teach. What I can't teach is the ability to communicate, the ability to lead, the ability to succeed. You bring those three into business, I'll teach you all the hard skills you need.
Those are definitely some great words that you just cited, for sure. Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, it's been quite the journey, Chaz.
Well, we're still going through the journey, Dan.
Oh, I know. I got a few years left. Gosh, I mean, you know as well as I do, I'd love nothing more than to be able to fade off into retirement and go play with the grandkids. It's just not quite that time yet.
I understand. Yeah. Well, my last question to you is, why Indiana?
Because I don't believe that there is a better state for business, period. I moved to Indiana for a job. I stayed in Indiana for my career and for my family. Indiana has so much going for it, so much going for it. As a business climate, in my personal opinion, it is second to none anywhere in the States. And as somebody that has been through all 50 states, except for Alaska, I haven't made it up to Alaska yet, one of these days. But it's the cold, and I'm getting old, and I don't like the cold. So at the end of the day, Indiana has been good for me. It's been good for business. It's been good for my family. It was a great place to raise my 5 kids. There's a lot to recommend Indiana, and I'm living proof that that the decision to move from Michigan to Indiana ultimately was the right one. I don't know that I would have had the same degree of acceptance and opportunity, that I've had anywhere else. And, raising your kids in a place where you don't look over your shoulder, so to speak, kind of nice.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, you heard it from himself. Entrepreneur, business owner, Air Force veteran, great guy. Hey, Indiana is a great place to be. Dan, I want to thank you for your service to our country, and as well as providing your insights today on the Patrick Connection Vodcast. And so I will see you later. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
I'm certain of it, Chaz. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today.
No problem. All right, everyone. Well, you heard it from himself. Dan's the man, telling the story about how he transitioned here to Indiana from Michigan, and obviously his Air Force journey here. His professional journey as he transitioned out of Air Force. That being said, catch me on the next episode. Definitely got some stuff lined up. And until next time, be well, be safe, and be warm.
thriving job market and low cost of living, plus a wide range of veteran benefits, make Indiana the perfect place for veterans of the United States military to call home. InVets can help you find that home. We're an organization started by veterans to help former service members transition to civilian life in our state. InVets can help you find the community with the career opportunities, housing, schools, and amenities that fit your lifestyle. So learn more about InVets. Visit us at invets.org today.